Bobby Davro.
The very same. The only entertainer from the 80s that hasn't been arrested. Stevie, it's great to be here.
That was gonna be my first question. It wasn't really.
I'm still here and I'm still above ground and it's great to be here.
Well, very excited about this. I've got your track listings here. I know that you concentrated a lot to get these songs.
Of course I did.
And the thing is, you've got stories about all these artists. I can't wait to do this
Hopefully
week.
I have. I mean, I wrote all the names and the tracks down on the back of a packet of cigarettes, you know, back of a fag packet.
Yeah.
That's what they say in it. And I've written it down in a bit of a rush. I might want to change them, but
okay. Well, let's see how we go this week. So my first question is, as we get into my 80s playlist this week, is I do think that you were the face of like the decade, which is
what, the 80s.
Yeah, it's
now,
amazing.
I'm in the 80s. No, not quite. I'm pushing 60.
How old are you now?
I'm pushing 60.
You look great.
No, I'm dragging it. I'm 60. I'm 60. There you go. There you go. Cut out just at the right time. I'm 65.
Do you know you haven't changed at all?
No, I don't think. You have to make. You mustn't count the years. You must make the years count. That's
yes.
what I say. And I've had a bit of a difficult couple of years, but through different personal things. But I'm still here and I'm still enjoying my life. And you're only given one life. 400 trillion to one, apparently.
There we are. We're very special, aren't we?
Professor Brian Cox told me. 400 trillion to one.
Now, let me ask you about Proclaimers then.
Yes.
500 Miles.
That's
Tell me about these boys.
Right, well, back in 1986, I was doing a TV show called Bobby Davro TV Weekly or On the Box. And I used to do all these impressions of pop stars, and that was my thing at that time. And the Proclaimers, I came on and did the Proclaimers, and we did it with a split screen thing. So I did the Proclaimers, but the reason why I've chosen this was a lovely story. About 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Saturday, someone phoned me up and said, "Oh, Bobby Davro." I said, "Who's that?" He went, "It's Peter Kay." I went, "Oh, clear off. I don't know Peter Kay. I've never met Peter Kay." He's winding me up. He said, "No, it's Peter Kay. I got your number from so-and-so." He said, "I'm a big fan of yours." He said, "I said, really, Peter?" He said, "I used to come and see you in Blackpool when you did summer seasons with my mum and dad. I'm a Bolton lad." I said, "I know you are, and you've done so well. Brilliant. You're brilliant." So anyway, I said, "What can I do for you, Peter?" He said, "What are you doing next Saturday?" I said, "Well, I'm not doing anything during the day or in the evening at the moment, so what can I do for you?" He said, "Will you come along to Elstree? We're making video for Comic Relief, second video. Did you see the first one?" I said, "I did, yeah, with the Amarillo one, written by Neil Sedaka, who's a wonderful talent." And I said, "I saw that, that's brilliant. And what can I do for you?" He said, "Well, come along to the studio in Elstree, we're recording video. Bring a friend along, so it's your busy friends." I think me and I was hanging around with the guy that do you know, my memory's going on, unfortunately, Kenny Lynch. We were doing a big corporate show, Sinatra show, and I took him along. So we get there, we meet Peter, he takes me to one side. He said, "I've got a surprise for you, Bob." I said, "What is it, Peter?" He said, "I'm not going to tell you till we make a video." So we go into the studio and they bring out the Proclaimer boys and then the lads from Little Britain, David Warren and Matt Lucas, and they record the thing. And in the middle of the song, or towards the end, where the la-li-la bit goes, they went, "Bobby Davro, Bobby Davro," and they all pointed at me. And so we did the video recording, and then I said to him afterwards, I said, "Will that be kept in?" He said, "Oh, aye, Bob." So it went to number 1 for about 12 weeks or so, and everywhere I went, everyone was going, "Bobby Davro, Bobby Davro." And I thought I'll use that as my opening song. And to this day, the opening song I use in my shows in my concerts is the Proclaimers. The Proclaimers with 500 Miles.
We're going to talk about Spandau Ballet Gold. Can I just ask you, so am I right in thinking that your first big break was it Live from Her Majesty's?
It certainly was, back in 1985, I think it was, yeah, 1984, 85.
How did you get on that show?
Well, I did one the year before that, and I was for first Comic-Con in the first half, and then I did reasonably well, and then they asked me the second year to do it, the second series, and I went on it. I sort of stole the show that night. Everyone was, I did Cliff Richard and a few singing impressions, and Freddie Starr, I used to do Freddie, and it was a great success, and the phone never stopped ringing. And and it sort of projected me into people's psyche, and I got given a show called Copycats, which was an impressionist.
Of course, I remember that. You're impressionist.
Impressionist.
Yes.
Yeah. And from then on, I always, the best advice I ever had was from Mike Yarwood, the late Mike Yarwood, who was a friend of mine, and he was one of my heroes. he said try and be original. So I never used to go along with the same impressions that everybody else did. So I was doing people like Alex Higgins and Max Headroom and people like that, and all the poppy things.
And the thing is, when you were on TV back then, people don't realise you got, like 20 million viewers.
Well, not quite as many. I think we did about 13.5 for one of the specials we had. So that was a lot of. But then again, there was only 4 or 5 channels. Wasn't there?
4 channels in the 80s.
Now there's so many channels to choose from, and. But I was very lucky. I was very fortunate, and they were great years. I was very creative. I'm still creative. I still work very hard at it, and I'm still out there doing it. It's just that television has sort of passed me over a little bit. I do some of the reality shows, which we'll talk about in a minute.
Tell me about Spandau Ballet. Why this song? Why Gold?
Well, I'll tell you what. My dad always says it. My late father, I loved him to death. He's lovely, and he always gave me great advice when I was a kid. He always said, always, whatever you do in show business or whatever you do in any business, always be prepared to open a few doors. Always be prepared to open a few doors. Great advice. It didn't help him. He got sucked out of an aeroplane. But he have to put a few jokes in here, I'm afraid, Stevie.
I hoped you were joking about that. I was a bit nervous.
He gave me great advice, and he always said it doesn't take anything to be nice to someone, and I always try and be nice to people. I'm a reasonably amicable bloke. I lose my temper occasionally, but very rarely with people.
Yeah.
And the reason why I wanted to mention Spandau is that I met Tony Hadley through the years, and Tony is one of my dear friends. And he's such a nice guy. His feet are firmly on the ground. He's a great bloke and a great singer. And he's done a lot of charity. I raised a lot of money for the Woking Hospice. And he always comes down and supports the charity show. And one of the great stars. And so I thought I'd like to play him singing, I think, Gold, which is also in my set when you come to see me, because I do a lot of singing in the show. So I always do Gold, and I always mention him. And he's struggled with his weight a bit, so I call him Expanding Belly. Expanding Belly. Tony had the Expanding Belly.
I bet that goes down the treat.
He hates it.
It's really great to meet you. I feel like I'm meeting one of my childhood heroes.
Oh, now you're making me feel
No,
old.
but listen, the whole family, this is the thing with your shows, we all used to sit down and it was like appointments to watch telly.
Yeah.
And, we kind of miss some of that now.
It was of its time. And I look back, because a lot of people have put sort of shows on YouTube and stuff, and I watch it and I don't recognise the boy I was then, because I was in my mid-20s.
You were that young? That's amazing.
30. And I look at it now and I see a lot of the good things, because when I was recording it, of course I was a perfectionist like most artists are, and I would always come back and if I watched it with my family, my mum and dad, my brother and my sis, we'd watch it. And I always used to feel embarrassed, and I thought I could have done that better, or that could have been funny, or that wasn't so good. But I didn't see the good things about it. But I must have been reasonably good, because they kept giving me serious.
No, you were better than good. Now, listen, you put Billy Joel, Uptown Girl, on the list.
Yeah.
Introduce this for us. Why do you want it?
I'm a huge music fan. I love singer-songwriters. My best friend in life, who's a personal friend of mine, we're like family together, is Gilbert O'Sullivan. And Gilbert O'Sullivan, I impersonated back in the late 80s as well. I would say he's my sort of idol in a way. I love his music and I love his songwriting, and because it's not of that era, I don't think that there's many songs that you'd probably know from the 80s. He was very much through the 70s, but I was always into singer-songwriters, and Billy Joel was a big influence on me, and I always wanted to learn the mouth organ to Piano Man. And a gentleman stopped me in the high street when I was doing one of these charity concerts, and I said, pleased to meet you, and his name was Elio Pace. And Elio is a smashing fella. And I said, what are you doing next Sunday? We're doing this big charity show. Would you come on and sing a few songs? Because he does the very best Billy Joel tribute. I mean, it's the show. You've got to go and see Elio Pace. He's absolutely fantastic. And he does all the Billy Joel set. And I said, on one condition, you let me sing Piano Man, and I'll learn the mouth organ, which is something I've always wanted to do.
Oh, wow.
Is it difficult? He said, go down and buy a mouth organ. I bought a mouth organ. He said, get it in the key of C. He said, it's pretty easy, just copy the record. So there I am every single day for an hour blowing on this mouth organ, note by note. And my kids were living with me at the time, and they were going, shut up, Dad, we're trying to watch Love Island or whatever it is. And on the night we actually did the show, I went out there and I pinned it and did really well. And my daughter came in the interval and was crying. I said, what's the matter with this? She said, Dad, I had to listen to you playing that bloody mouth organ for an hour a day. It was driving us mad, but I'm so proud of you. And that's why she was crying. And so Piano Man is now in there, and I play the piano a little bit, and and play the mouth organ. And because that is a 70s song, I believe, I'd love to play a bit of Billy Joel, Uptown Up.
I know you've got a story about Men at Work, this song, Down Under. Tell me about your story connected to this song.
It was when I took up running, when I was about 20 years old. I started running and I discovered Men at Work. And there's, a singer-songwriter, a guy called Colin Hay, who is absolutely fantastic. He's one of the great singer-songwriters. And he joined, it's an Australian group apparently, because I think he's a Geordie lad. He comes from the northeast. He might be Scottish, he was Geordie. I think he's a Geordie. And he's written some wonderful songs. And I loved his voice. I've got a couple of his albums. He has some wonderful songs out there. And I used to run every day like my father, because my father was a guy called Bill Nankerville, who was a British mile champion for 3 years, and my dad got me sort of running. He ran in 2 Olympics, 48 and 52 Olympics, with Roger Bannister.
Wow!
And he encouraged me to run. I don't do it so much nowadays. The only thing that runs in with me now is my nose, basically, on a cold day like today.
I wonder what you were going to say.
I know, yeah. And what I had yesterday, yeah. But we don't talk about that. It must be hereditary. It runs in your genes. There you go. I think the listeners know what I'm talking about. Very unpleasant. Anyway, and I used to run all the time playing this album, and the one off the Men at Work album is one of my favourite tracks.
As we go into this song, question for you. You know, when you were growing up, when you were a teenager, did you always have that twinkle in your eye that you wanted to be a star, or did that just happen? What did you want to be when you were at school?
I didn't know. I was messing about all the time. I was, the classroom clown. I guess. I didn't really know what I was going to do. And my dad asked me when I was very young. The whole family said, "What are you going to be when you grow up?" I said, "I want to be a comedian," and they all just laughed. Well, they're not laughing now, are they? No, they're not, are they? My dad said, if you can make just one person laugh, if you want to be a comedian, you can make just one person laugh, then you're rubbish. You've got to make a lot of people laugh to be a comedian. But I found my way into it, and that was again through my dad introducing me into an amateur variety group, which was a local group to me, and I started learning a few tricks of the trade. Then I went out and did the stag circuit in and around London. That's a real apprenticeship, that is. And then, fortunately, I found my way into summer shows and pantomimes and the things that I do now. And I can't do anything else, basically.
I've got so many questions for you. Let's get on to the next one. I'm going to attempt to make a serious conversation with Bobby Davro now.
Serious conversation.
Mike and the Mechanics, The Living Years, is a song that can get to me. Do you know? You just hear it, and you think about, what this song's about. Yeah. Him losing his dad and stuff.
He wasn't there the day that my father died. Yeah, it's very relevant. And 1984 was Live Aid, wasn't it?
Yes.
And so Bob Geldof. I was chatting to Bob Geldof not that long ago, actually, about 3 or 4 years ago, just before the lockdown, and he liked snooker. And he went along to a snooker event that I was involved in, and it's in Amersham. I think Bob lives in Amersham. And I went up to him, I said, and I'd met him before, many years before that, and I impersonated him, and he said, can I tell you something? This is my voice, I might not be doing the impression as well as maybe I used to do it. And he said, I tell you something, I was up a ladder, he said, I was living with my wife, Paula, and I heard my voice on the TV, and I was painting a ceiling or something. I came down there and I was getting annoyed because Paula was laughing. And I came down, it was you were impersonating me. He said, and I was really angry and Paula was laughing, and then it swapped from him, basically, me doing him, to the girl, Jessica Martin, who I shared the TV shows with, and she started doing Paula. And then I started to laugh. He said, we were both laughing together, he said, and we loved you ever since, making us laugh. And so I thought it would be nice to give that again a mention, because 84 was a fantastic achievement.
Were you at Live Aid? Did you have anything to do with it? Did you watch it, or do you remember it being?
Oh, I remember watching it on the telly. It was a fantastic thing, and it was a great cause, and it should always be remembered. And he was rightly given the knighthood for what his achievements were, and he was a nice fella. And so this song, it made me cry, like it made many people cry, and it became even more relevant when my dad died, and I was just having children as well at the time of hearing this song, sort of thing. And it does, it makes everybody, I get a bit choked up just thinking about it. That last verse,
gets me every time.
It gets me every time. and so it's a great song, well worth playing.
Okay, wonderful. This is special. Stevie Wonder, Sting, you've put this song on. No one's ever asked for this, and it's a great song. Tell me why you've gone for this one.
Well, Sting, I've met Sting as well. I'm such a name dropper. And he married a girl called Trudy, and I married a girl called Trudy, so we had something both in common. We did a concert together, a big charity event, and I stood in the wings with him, and we got chatting. A smashing fella, and I've always been a Police fan, and of course always been a Sting fan. And then Stevie Wonder, again, a singer-songwriter, who was fantastic. I remember going to see his concert, and I was right down the front, and he was asking for requests, and I said, do a jazz chord. And he could hear me. Obviously, he couldn't see me, so I had to put his sleeve. And so he could hear me shouting, "I do a jazz chord." And he's going, "Okay." And he played a jazz chord on the thing. I went, "No, do a jazz chord." And he went, "Sorry, man, I don't know what you mean." And he played another chord. I said, "No, a jazz chord, do a jazz chord." And he said, "I don't know what you mean, man." I went, "Oh, you know the one I'm talking about. I just called to say I love you." And it's a terrible joke, isn't it? But no, I love Stevie Wonder. I really, really love Stevie Wonder. And then, of course, Sting had that wonderful song. Is it Fields of Gold? I think
beautiful.
Is it
that
Fields
is,
of Gold?
yeah,
Fields of
yeah.
Gold.
It's beautiful.
And I thought I'd play that because if you ever get a chance to see the video of that performance where Stevie plays the mouth organ, and if I could only play the mouth organ like him.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And so this is one of my favourite songs.
You must have, as we go into this, you must have met so many famous people. You know, just you were around at that time, and lots of those people are not with us anymore. Is there one person that that kind of pinch me moment going, I can't believe I met that person?
I've met Elton John, and who was lovely. I sung with Elton John. He was on the radio. I was on the toilet at the time. And it's a terrible joke. I've got to stick a few jokes in. And
this is why we love you.
Elton John came on my This Is Your Life. He did a video piece.
Did he?
Yeah, and it was nice to meet Elton because, again, he's one of my up there heroes.
Yeah.
And I got a real moment with Tony Bennett. I love Tony Bennett as well, and I had the chance to meet Tony Bennett. And a friend of mine, Ron Brand, who is he's the father to Russell Brand, the comedian, and I'd never met Russell before, and I met him a couple of years back. And I took Ron to see Tony Bennett, and Ron was telling me about the fact that he'd met Tony Bennett at a Amy Winehouse party. And he took me backstage, and we couldn't get in. But fortunately, as we couldn't get in because we didn't have the right passes after the Tony Bennett at the Royal Albert Hall, we went round backstage trying to get in, and we couldn't get in. We didn't have the passes. And then all of a sudden, Van Morrison came up the stairs with the songwriter Don Black, and I know Don quite well. I've hung around with Don and seen him in shows and stuff, and he gave us passes to go downstairs, and he was so excited. Ron Brand said, "I know Tony Bennett." So we were in the bar downstairs after the Tony Bennett concert, and then his PA lady came out and said, "Tony's gonna have a photo." So I'm right down the front. I shook Tony Bennett's hand, and he walked off, and then Ron went, Tony, do you remember me? And he turned around like that, and Tony and Ron went up. I said, "I met you at this Amy Winehouse's party," and he just looked at Ron and didn't say anything, just turned around very slowly and walked off. And the crestfallen face of Ron, and I tease Ron every time I see him about, "Do you know Tony Bennett?" But Tony Bennett was one of my heroes, and I took my dad to see him as well.
Amazing.
And we had the most fantastic. He did the best bit of stagecraft I've ever seen. He'd done about 2 hours of songs with his quartet, the Albert Hall, and at the end he put the microphone down and he sung without any backing at all in the Albert Hall, fly me to the moon, let me play among the stars. And it was the greatest thing. I stood up, everybody did, and I cried because it was so brilliant.
Yeah,
the world's going to miss that man.
As we go into Paul Young, I just want to ask you, how do you think, what's the moment you will be remembered for in the 80s? Because you're on so many different shows, and your impressions, and at Her Majesty's and stuff like that. What's been the highlight of your career?
I don't know. Hopefully it hasn't come yet. That's what I always think. I always fall forward. You have to work. I met Roy Walker, who was the catchphrase, and say what you see and all that. And I met him when I was 20, and I went backstage at the Congress Theatre in Eastbourne and stood by the stage door, and he came out, and I said, "Mr. Walker, I'm a comedian, I'm just starting out, can you give me some tips?" And he just said, "Do an hour a day, Bobby, and do an hour a day." And I still do an hour a day, and as I say, I've been in the business now 48 years, and so sound a bit like Danny LaRue there, 50 years. Show business, ha ha.
So when you say you do an hour a day, does that mean that you...
I think about it an hour a day.
Right, okay.
Think about it, I write, I learn songs, I'm forever productive. And if anyone comes to see the shows, I'm always changing bits and bobs. I'm always working at it. I've never given up. And failure isn't a failure unless you give up.
Brilliant.
You know, and Roy gave me some great advice. As far as my pivotal moment, I suppose, was getting my first special for TVS. And Live at Her Majesty's was a moment that I always look back on. Some wonderful moments, and hopefully I've got many more to come.
Brilliant. And tell me about Paul Young, because you know him, don't you?
Yeah. Well, what happened was one of my specials, one of my first specials I did with John K. Cooper, it got put up for an award at the Montreux Television Awards, and I went over to Montreux, and I remember it was a stinking wet day, and I was walking down the pathway, and another man was coming towards me in a Mac, and it was pouring down with rain, and it was the famous Scottish Stanley Baxter, and I met him, and then I went to the reception and the thing, and afterwards, and I had done, I think, on that particular show, a medley of impressions, one of which was Paul Young. And I got into a lift, and the door opened in the lift, and Paul was in there. And I was a bit embarrassed, you know, because I'd never met him before. He's about 6'8".
Yeah.
He's
tall, isn't
he's tall, isn't he? And I said, "Did you see the impression of the?" He went, "Yeah," because I started. Do you remember he used to go, "Hey, you can't stop the pump," and it basically, he said, "Yeah," he said, "You made me sound like Kermit the Frog," and I felt a bit embarrassed. But then from then on, we became friends, and we're still friends. I don't see an awful lot of him now, and he had a few vocal problems, but I thought it'd be lovely to play one of his songs because I'm a huge fan.
As we go into this song, have you ever met anyone that you've impersonated and it hasn't gone down well?
Yes.
Really?
Patrick Moore didn't like me particularly. I remember doing an impression right next to him, and it was some sort of TV thing that they were doing. And he said, I don't sound anything like that. And Claire Rayner, of course, that's famous Claire. I used to do a send-up of a character called Auntie Claire. "Hello, lovey. Will you do that for me, lovey? Will you? I've got a letter here for a young man called Stevie." And she hated me. And whenever I used to go to TVAM, she used to hide behind the scenery when I came in. She really hated me. But most people are flattered. They say it's mimicry is the sincerest form of flattery.
Of course.
Not really. It's a bit of a piece when I do it.
Now, look, I'm looking forward to this. Freddie Mercury, tell me about him. You met him, didn't you?
I met him once at Paul McKenna's party. Paul McKenna was having a party at the Hypnotist.
Yeah.
And I met him there, and he was very, very nice with me. We spent about 10 minutes chatting about the business, and sadly he was pretty poorly then, and he was, I think, the ultimate pop star. I thought he was fantastic. And again, at Live Aid, if I'm right in saying, I think they stole the show that time.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
They were sensational.
That's interesting, though, just to cut in. So you met him when he was poorly, because, he kind of went off radar, didn't he? And back then there was kind of rumours in the press that he was ill, and then, obviously he announced he had AIDS just before he passed.
Yeah.
How was he dealing with it when you met him? How did he look? How did he talk about it?
Particularly well, if I'm honest. But you're not going to look very well when you've got that dreadful illness. But he did bring to the forefront there the association with the fact the disease, HIV and AIDS. I have a lot of gay friends of mine that have lost partners. That a couple of friends which have been battling with it. Of course, they've managed to, through science, they've managed to correct it and restrain it. And it's not the killer that it was that it used to be. And I think Freddie had at the time, and it was a little brushed under the carpet a little bit at the time. But I think because of his passing with it, everyone became much more aware of just how dreadful the disease was and his. And I thought they handled it extremely well, and it was lovely that although we remember him for struggling with that illness, we remember him for his music, and by far he was one of the greatest performers I've ever seen.
Yeah,
sensational. And
one of the bravest things is a video. So These Are the Days of Our Lives. Yep. In the black and white video, I think it was kind of the moment he kind of waved goodbye to the world, really, at the end of that song. Yeah. But how bright! I mean, literally, he was in the last few months of his life.
He was
when he recorded that.
Yeah, and there was another one, wasn't it? Was it? Correct me if I'm wrong. He did another one. Nobody Wants to Live Forever. Is that?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the title of the song, but that always gets me when I hear that.
Yeah.
And I thought it'd be lovely to never let that man out of our psyche, because he was brilliant. One of the greatest I've ever seen.
We've come to the end of my 80s playlist.
It goes quickly, doesn't it?
It's been amazing to chat with you and stuff. First question I've got to ask you just before we go into your last song is, can I get to see you live? Are you doing any live shows?
I'm doing, excuse me, I just continually work, just because I'm not on the forefront of television producers' minds. I'm still out there doing live shows. I work 3 or as much as I can. I work probably every night because I love what I do. I love making people laugh. And in this mad world of cancel culture, everything is funny if you can laugh at it. Everything.
Well, this is going to be my second question. I was going to ask you, what's the state of comedy now?
I think it's...
Can you still be funny
Yes,
and not be afraid?
Of course, you mustn't be afraid, because a sense of humour is only a personal thing, isn't it? Everyone has a different sense of humour. It's a personal thing. Offence isn't given, it's taken. Always remember that. If you don't like it, you've got 2 legs, you can get up, you can walk out, you can turn the person off. Comedy is about being brave. It's about like the great Ricky Gervais says, the subject of a joke isn't always the joke, and people get confused about that. You mention a word or something, they go, "Oh, it's going to be offensive. It's going to be offensive." It isn't offensive. You choose to take. If someone comes up to me and says, "You're an offensive comedian," I say, "No, I'll correct you. It's you that found me offensive. Everyone else was laughing. It's just you.
Yeah.
And you can't please everyone. So I don't care. Critics don't hurt me anymore. The only critic I listen to, and that's not me being vain or arrogant in any way, is that the only critic I listen to is myself. I know when I've done something which I shouldn't have done.
Yeah. I
know when I've done something badly, or when I've done something good. You can't be loved by everyone. As long as you're appealing to the majority, and I think the majority of people are fed up with all this woke and cancel culture. I really do, and I think it's changing. In fact, it's not working for the community, the woke community, and the cancel culture. It's going against them. People will find their own way, and you can't stop people laughing if they think you're funny. There's lots of comedians a lot more offensive than I am out there, if you choose to be offended by them. But it's a joke. I was in PC World yesterday. Can't say anything in there. Everything is funny if you can laugh at it.
Bobby, we love you, and thank you so much for coming in. Just introduce this Jerry Rafferty song and tell me why you want this song. So this is Get It Right Next Time.
Yeah, Get It Right Next Time. I actually went to see Billy Connolly, the great Billy Connolly, and after the show, and he actually mentioned me in his concert, which I was really flattered by. And then we went back to the after-do party. It was the after-tour party, and loads of famous people were in there. And I met Billy backstage then, and there was one man sitting in the side of the room at the party on his own, and I felt a bit sorry for him, so I went up chatting to him. I said, "What's your name?" He said, "I'm Salman Rushdie." And I said, "What do you do for a living?" He said, "I've just written a book called Satanic Verses." I went, "Oh my goodness." I realised, of course, they put this dreadful fatwa out on him, which was totally out of order, in my opinion. And no one would sit next to him. They were scared someone was going to come in and take him out. But I chatted to him. And so I tried to make that, what's your next book going to be? Buddha is a fatty or something, So I'll try to make jokes with this wonderful author, and he's very much an incredibly intelligent man. Anyway, so we finished, and I hadn't seen Billy for nigh on 15 years, and I took my friend along, or my friend took me, had tickets to see him at the Apollo, and then I said, well, let's go backstage to meet Billy Connolly, and my mate couldn't believe that he's going to meet Billy Connolly, and I got in and went backstage and went into a dressing room, and Billy remembered. He went, Bobby Davro, the bravest man I've ever known, the bravest man who was so brave it's had next to Salman Rushdie. And what a charming, intelligent, brilliant man Billy Connolly is.
Yeah.
And this is why I thought I'd come up, and I sat next to, I'm going to get round to saying it, I sat next to Jerry Rafferty, and I loved his music. Again, a brilliant songwriter, bought his albums, but I didn't enjoy his company, that's all I'm going to say. But I loved his music, so I thought it'd be a good one to choose.
Nothing about why?
Not really, it just wasn't very friendly.
Okay.
But, you have to speak as you find.
No, absolutely.
It doesn't change things. He was an incredible songwriter. It's just that I met him, and that was the story I associated with him.
Can I thank you for being lovely, and thank you for coming in. It's a real pleasure to meet you.
There's
really,
a million
really
other
great
songs that have come into my head now, but it's a real pleasure and an honour.
Thank you, Bobby.
Virgin Radio.